In 1 month, I'll be celebrating my 32nd birthday, which makes me twice as old as Meat Monk and half the age of Sea-Doo. And if you're wondering who the f is talking, sup guys, it's Big Moran. Normally a dude named Dan does the voice acting, but today I'm just gonna take a shot at it. Anyway, am I actually ashamed to be a boomer in the PvP community? Absolutely not. In fact, I think it's kinda cool that over the past 20 years, I've been able to meet some legendary players, and they've all taught me something cool about WoW Arena. Today I wanted to share 3 of the most helpful tips I've learned over the past 2 decades. Starting with positioning. But to be more specific, parallel and perpendicular positioning. Now don't worry, this isn't going to turn into high school geometry class, but we need to bust out our protractors to understand positioning in PvP. I used to have a really bad habit of running around pillars all day when I was getting trained. I thought I was doing something smart because I was avoiding damage, but as it turns out, I was just pissing off my partners since I was basically kiting them too. That's until I learned about the golden rule of positioning, to make triangles. Instead of running around a pillar to kite melee, I should have been kiting into the open, but why? Well, by running perpendicular to my partners, it makes it way easier for them to help me by creating 2 points of contact, allowing them to interact with me and the enemy DPS at the same time. In other words, it forms a triangle to allow for spacing. Spacing is a concept we've covered on this channel in the past, and it's what makes DPS miserable, especially melee. The further your team is spread apart, the harder it is for them to reach any single target, which makes everyone's life easier on your team. The other bad habit I had early on was struggling to land CC on enemy healers. I thought it was impossible if they just avoided me all game at a pillar while I was getting trained. That is until I learned about parallel positioning. It's good to think of healers like someone walking a dog, who I guess in this case is actually a fairy warrior. There's an invisible leash that connects healers to their DPS. So if they're camping at a pillar 24/7, all we need to do is run in a parallel line away from them, forcing their DPS to push in, dragging their healer on a leash into the open. And now we've made it easier for anyone on our team to land CC. Positioning is something I've personally learned from Chanimal, as he spent the past decade making life miserable for Sea-Doo in tournaments. No matter what team he's playing on, Chanimal is able to manipulate positioning with his team to make the game unplayable for his opponents. And by the way, if you like these map animations, there's a ton of them in our positioning courses. Like all of our content, we designed our positioning guides to level up your gameplay 1 step at a time. Instead of overcomplicating things with advice that doesn't really work for every player, we focus on teaching WoW from your perspective with tips that actually work to increase your rating. That's why our class guides continue to be the most effective way to learn any spec in PvP, allowing you to skip the annoying process of learning new specs. So after this video, be sure to check out the special discount link below if you want to learn more about skillcap.com and how you can gain 400 rating risk-free. For now, back to the video. A few weeks ago, I asked a bunch of top European players who they thought was the best sub-rogue in Solo Shuffle. Their answer was honestly really surprising. Even though he might be the best rogue in the region, it was not actually Waz. It was actually a rogue named Addons, who is more known for his skills in BG Blitz, because he was the first player in the world to ever reach 4K rating. I was curious what made Addons so good, so I went to his VODs and watched him play Solo Shuffle, and honestly within a few minutes I was absolutely terrified, because it was quite apparent that his #1 strategy was to make the enemy healer feel completely miserable. And this wasn't because he was spam CCing them, it was because he was actually spam killing them. And the way he does it is super interesting. Now just for some context, I've been a Resto Druid main since TBC, and over the past 20 years, I've definitely died like a complete noob hundreds of times. I've encountered players just like Addons who are expert healer slayers, and here's how they do it. Addons wasn't training the healer from start to finish, but instead he was constantly swapping to them after already building pressure on their DPS. But why is this so good? Well, the #1 mistake players make is assuming that the best way to kill a healer is to just tunnel them from start to finish, which makes the damage super predictable. However, if you already have 2 or 3 targets low before you swap to the healer, you now put them under insane pressure because it puts them super behind. And most importantly, it opens up multiple kill targets. This strategy is super effective, especially now. And this is about to sound like a burning hot take, but healers are the most overpowered they've ever been. And yes, I'm saying this as someone who mains healer. Alright, so I know that there might be some comments disagreeing, and of course I know that healing is stressful and that the MMR system is broken, but think about it. Right now, healers are able to keep people alive at 70% dampening. That is absolutely insane when you compare Arena to the past, where if you took a single mortal strike, it was basically a death sentence. Modern healers have an absurd amount of power tied into strong instant cast heals, which is why pressuring them is now more important than ever, especially if you are a class without spammable CC. Most healers also passively struggle with AoE damage. Unlike those nerds who spend their time killing dragons, most PvP builds are designed for strong single target healing, because 90% of the time it's just one person under pressure. My number 2 nightmare in solo shuffle is Shadow Priest because they're really good at spreading out damage and they always seem to swap to me in the middle of the game with their stun silence combo, which is honestly super stressful. But my number 1 nightmare is Assassination Rogue, who are absurdly good at dealing multi-target pressure thanks to their AoE garrotes and their ability to simply kidney shot me on cooldown. But it's not just rogues and Shadow Priests that can be scary, and I would argue that most DPS would benefit from occasionally swapping to healers in solo shuffle. And again, the best way to do this is after you've already built pressure on other targets. Now, moving on, I think efficiency is one of the more recent things that I've learned, and in my opinion, it is actually the number 1 concept players need to understand if they truly want to gain rating. Efficiency can mean a lot of things in PvP, but let's start with damage. Recently, Snoopy made a video ranking the burst of every class in PvP, with some specs like Fury Warriors killing him 100-0 in under 2 seconds. In fact, over 13 specs were able to do this in just under 4 seconds, which is pretty crazy. But how are players able to do so much damage? Well, it starts by understanding efficiency. There's a secret Blizzard doesn't want you to know about class design. It's that no matter what spec we play, Blizzard wants us to all be rogues. Well, metaphorically, of course. Obviously, you know that rogues have abilities that build combo points and abilities that spend them. We'll call these builders and spenders. It's very original, I guess. But anyway, the more combo points you build, the bigger your spenders will hit. The reason we're all secretly rogues is because most classes have combo points that you don't actually see. For instance, here's my druid casting a raw NS regrowth on a target dummy for 1 million healing. Not bad, but let's generate some hidden combo points and suddenly NS regrowth is healing for 6 million without using any cooldowns. The combo points in this situation were the builders, which gave me enough healing modifiers in order to get a giant spender. And this is how almost every spec is designed to work. Modifiers allow you to do significantly more throughput with less buttons, but only if you build the right set of combo points in the right order. In other words, modifiers allow you to be super efficient with your rotation. World Force Raiders are forced to be hyper efficient with their damage since they're on strict timers to down bosses, and in Arena, you're on a few different timers too. Remember how we said that healers are secretly OP? You need to do as much burst as possible during a single CC chain because otherwise most healers will just press their one magic button to prolong the game for another minute. And even outside of your burst windows, if you aren't abusing modifiers, you're going to be doing dramatically less damage than you should be, which kind of creates a snowball effect that causes your entire gameplay to suffer. Doing less damage means the enemy team can play more aggressive, which then puts you under pressure, causing you to do less damage. It's a vicious cycle. And as we just saw, modifiers are super important for healers too. A few weeks ago, we saw thousands of healers re-roll to Holy Priest, but that didn't mean that they were all just instantly good at the spec. There's a high chance that most of them just copy-pasted some build from Murloc and then went into the game to slam Q solo shuffle without really thinking about how to abuse their most important modifier, Desperate Times. This single talent literally defines the way you heal as a Holy Priest, since it means you can reliably do 20% more healing. And doing low healing adds to the vicious cycle. It means your team will take more pressure, which means they'll do less damage and cause the enemy team to play more aggressive. It just kind of goes on and on. This is why when we design our class courses, we make sure to show how to abuse every important modifier, because if you aren't doing it, it's like you're playing half of your class. But being efficient in PvP means a lot more than just how you sequence your damage or healing globals. It also changes how you use your crowd control. If there's one thing that I think truly separates players these days is how annoying they can be with micro CCs. A good player will use whatever button is lit up on their bars to stop 5 casts in a row. It's just really infuriating. Let's get one thing out of the way first. Crowd control is super annoying. Nobody likes getting micro CC'd or tanking 3 cyclones in a row. But if there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's that the higher you go in rating, the more efficient players will be with how and when they CC. Good players will always try to maximize GPM, which is a term I completely made up during Shadowlands to represent goes per minute. In other words, how often you can do a setup in Arena. The class that has frustrated me the most as a healer over the past 20 years is Hunter. A good Hunter will guarantee that I don't play for half the game, making sure that they land their freezing trap on cooldown every single time. When you watch Big Max play, he's doing this constantly. When the gates open in solo shuffle, I instantly know if the enemy hunter is good if the first global they press is intimidation out of camouflage. Just watch as Sidhu's team is forced to burn every single defensive in their spellbook simply because the hunter pressed trap and fired off an aim shot. Good players are also hyper efficient at abusing micro CCs, especially disarms. The millisecond someone presses their big 2-minute offensive, you can guarantee that a high-rated player will be ready to disarm it. It is literally the most efficient play you can make in most situations. I mean, just think about it. You're trading a 1-minute disarm in order to completely counter a 2-minute cooldown. That's what we call value. It's also frustrating because when I play DPS, sometimes that I forget that I have these micro CCs too. But recently I actually found a solution. It's good old Doom Cooldown Pulse, which is one of the OG WoW add-ons. All it does is simply give me a simple reminder that an important ability has come off cooldown, which is nice because it reminds me to be efficient. In fact, I found it so useful that we're considering adding it to the skill capped UI with everything already pre-filtered and ready to go. So just let me know in the comments if this is something you'd like to see. But to wrap things up, efficiency also affects how you trade your cooldown. Now I know that cooldown trading isn't always the most exciting thing in the world, but it's super important. First, let's start with a question. Warlocks have 2 defensive cooldowns that can be pressed while stunned. Dark Pact, which gives them a massive shield, and Unending Resolve, which is basically their big damage reduction cooldown. Which one of these abilities should the Warlock be pressing first? The answer is always going to be Dark Pact, but why? Well, because its cooldown is much shorter. Your goal in every arena game is to press your high impact abilities as many times as you can. If you press Dark Pact as your first cooldown in a 5-minute game, it means you can still press it at least 4 more times, while still being able to use Unending Resolve twice. But if you wall first, it's like you eliminate one chance to use your Dark Pact later on. In other words, it messes up your cooldown efficiency. We're always getting questions on Discord about how to rotate cooldowns, and more often than not, the answer is just cycling through your shorter cooldowns before relying on your bigger ones. Sometimes when I play solo shuffle, I get super upset when a Shadow Priest will life swap before dispersion. This is just stupid to me because dispersion is less than half the cooldown and will save them no matter what. And I've been watching the AWC now for a very long time, and if there's one team that's always impressed me when it comes to efficiency, it's Drake, Prev, and Brain. It's no surprise that they've won almost every tournament in North America for the past 5 years, but why? It's because these 3 dudes work together like a machine to be as efficient as possible with their cooldowns. They've managed to beat even the most aggressive players in the world, including Pikaboo, who, by the way, in case you didn't know, was actually a retail WoW player before he started playing hardcore. He's actually the father of another famous streamer, xaryu. Jokes aside, I seriously think that efficiency is one of the most underrated ways to get better in PvP. Anyway, after nearly 20 years of PvP, I can say with certainty that there is a lot of things I wish I knew earlier. That's why it's always been my personal goal at SkillCap to truly help players improve. For instance, I know a lot of players struggle with the spec I personally main, which is why I focused on designing the Restored Druid course with efficiency in mind, making it easy to learn a spec that many people find difficult. We apply this mindset to every course on our website, which is why even after 10 years, SkillCap is still helping thousands of players every season. And honestly, there's never been a better time to join since we have so many amazing benefits, including the skill-capped UI, which you already know about, and it's something that I personally use, especially to help me gear my ults with the brand new Bizlist feature. We're so confident that we can help you hit your goals this season that we even offer a rating gain guarantee. So if you're interested in signing up, we have a special discount link below. For now, I want to thank you all for watching. See you soon.